So I was recently watching the Dark Knight Trilogy and I noticed something similar throughout films. Most of their villains represent anarchy.
Introduce a little anarchy. Upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos.
And of course, the curious guy that I am, I began to ask the question, which of these guys actually represent true anarchy? And is this what anarchy actually is like? Because lately I've been reading on the book on anarchism by Noam Chomsky. And I feel like this is a lot more important in our current society today than anything else. Anarchy is one of the most misunderstood words in human history. We were taught to hear it and imagine fire, chaos, collapse. But Chomsky argues something far more dangerous to power than chaos, that authority must justify itself. And if it can, it doesn't deserve to exist. That line hit me hard, because if there's no justification for a law, a system, or a hierarchy, then it isn't there to protect people. It's there to control them. This is Devil's Midnight Thesis. Tonight, we're using the Dark Knight Trilogy as a philosophical battleground to ask one uncomfortable question. Is anarchy really chaos? Or is it the lie authority tells us to stay obedient? Anarchy does not mean no rules. That's the first lie. According to Noam Chomsky, anarchism starts from a simple moral position. All authority must justify itself. If it can, it should be dismantled and replaced with voluntary cooperative systems. So when Hollywood shows us anarchists as madmen, terrorists, or cult leaders, we should ask, who benefits from that image? Before we can understand what anarchy truly is, we have to confront the version we're taught to fear. Because for most of us, anarchism wasn't introduced through philosophy, history, or lived experience. It was introduced through villains. Stories taught us that without authority, society collapses. That order is the only thing standing between us and ruin. And few stories have shaped that fear more deliberately than Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Trilogy, where every challenge to authority wears the face of a monster. And anarchy is never allowed to exist without blood in its hands. What's important to understand is that these villains don't represent different ideas. They represent different distortions of the same idea. Each one embodies a version of anarchy that conveniently justifies why authority must always remain in control. Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, is the first distortion, moral elitism. He believes society is corrupt, but he doesn't believe people are capable of change. His solution isn't liberation, it's purification. He destroys cities not to free people, but to reset civilization according to his judgment.
Only a cynical man would call what these people have lives, Wayne. Crime, despair. This is not how man was supposed to live.
This isn't anarchism. It's hierarchy reinforced through fire. Authority doesn't disappear, it concentrates. The Joker is the second distortion, nihilism. He claims to tear down systems, but offers nothing in their place. His chaos isn't freedom, it's despair. He wants people to believe morality itself is a lie, that compassion is only a mask enforced by rules.
See, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
This version of anarchy is useful to power because it tells us that without control, humanity becomes monstrous. Then comes Bane, the most convincing lie of all. Revolution without consent.
Take Gotham from the corrupt, the rich, the oppressors of generations who have kept you down with myths of opportunity, and we give it back to you, the people. Gotham is yours. Do as you please.
He speaks the language of liberation, frees prisoners, topples elites, but never gives people agency. The masses are props. Authority doesn't vanish, it simply changes uniforms. This is what happens when rebellion becomes another form of domination. Every so-called anarchist in these films, Ra's al Ghul, the Joker, Bane, shares the same hidden belief that ordinary people cannot be trusted with their freedom. This assumption is the moral foundation of every authoritarian system ever built. It's the idea that people need to be managed, restrained, and guided for their own good. But this belief isn't just cynical, it's convenient. Because if people are incapable of governing themselves, then authority becomes necessary by default. Surveillance becomes protection, violence becomes order, control becomes morality. And anyone who questions that control can be dismissed as naive or dangerous. What's fascinating is that Nolan spends 3 entire films constructing villains who embody this worldview, and then, in a single moment, accidentally disproves all of them. Not through Batman, not through the police, nor the institutions, but through ordinary people. And that moment is the crack where the entire myth of anarchy begins to collapse. The ferry scene in The Dark Knight is the most anarchic moment in the entire trilogy. And it's not framed as a revolution, a riot, or a violent uprising. It's quiet, tense. 2 ferries, one filled with civilians, one filled with prisoners, each given the power to destroy the other. No external authority to intervene. The Joker is certain of the outcome. He believes that when stripped of rules and consequences, people will reveal their true nature. That fear will win. That survival will override empathy. But that's not what happens. What happens is that the prisoners refuse to kill the innocent people. The civilians refuse to press the button. In the absence of coercion, people don't descend into chaos. They deliberate. They hesitate. They choose restraint. This moment matters because it contradicts the foundational lie we're taught about anarchy, that without authority, morality disappears. Instead, what we see is something far more unsettling to power: morality emerging without permission. And once you see that, once you realize people are capable of choosing cooperation on their own, the fear-based justification for authority starts to look very fragile. This exact pattern, people choosing cooperation in the absence of centralized authority, didn't stay in Gotham. It played out in real life, especially after 2020, in places like Nepal, Indonesia, South Korea, and most recently Iran in 2026. We saw movements that didn't involve around a single leader, a rigid hierarchy, or a centralized command structure. Instead, they operated horizontally, decentralized, difficult to suppress, because there was no head to cut off. People organized mutual aid, shared resources, protected one another. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't appeal to authority for legitimacy. They withdrew legitimacy from systems that could no longer justify themselves. That's the crucial distinction. These weren't riots driven by chaos. They were collective refusals to obey unjust power. Anarchy not as destruction, but as self-organization. As people deciding together that certain laws, institutions, and commands no longer deserve compliance. Chomsky says, in essence, that if a law cannot be morally justified, then it exists for only one reason: to exercise power and control over the people subject to it. That idea reframes everything, because most of us were raised to believe that laws are inherently good, that order equals morality. But Chomsky flips that assumption on its head. He forces us to ask a much harder question. Justified according to whom? If a law exists but causes harm, if an institution demands obedience but cannot explain why, if authority enforces itself through fear rather than consent, then it doesn't deserve loyalty. Anarchy, in this sense, isn't about rejecting structure. It's about rejecting unjustified structure. It's about insisting that power answer to the people, not the other way around. And that's why this idea feels so urgent today. Because once you see that obedience without justification is just submission, you can't unsee it. So we end up where we began, with a question that feels simple but isn't. What is anarchy really? If the Dark Knight Trilogy taught us anything, it's how easily freedom can be framed as a threat. Ra's al Ghul taught us to fear moral judgment without consent. The Joker taught us to fear chaos without meaning. Bane taught us to fear revolution without accountability. Each of them wore the mask of anarchy, and each of them failed, because none of them trusted people. But the quiet truth of Gotham is that when authority stepped aside, people didn't become monsters. They hesitated. They chose restraint. And they chose each other. But maybe the real danger isn't chaos. Maybe it's the moment we stop asking why we're obeying at all. That's the responsibility anarchy places back in our hands. So maybe the Dark Knight Trilogy wasn't warning us about anarchy. Maybe it was warning us about losing faith in ourselves. Because when people are given a choice, without fear, they often choose better than their rulers ever did. This has been Devil's Midnight Thesis. Take responsibly. Or better yet, take responsibility.